Hi there. Come on in. It's time for Old Time Radio. I'm your host, Jerry Sharp, inviting you to pull up a chair and listen with me to some old-time radio shows. I've got the old majestic radio all warmed up. We're going to reach out into that ether and listen to some comedy, adventure, and drama on old-time radio. And on today's show, Stella Dallas. Now, this is a show that represents soap operas at its best. This show started way back in 1938 and continued until 1955. And then in our second half hour, hear The Lone Ranger. Early in life, Stella married Stephen Dallas. He was an adventurer, a man of the world. And the life of a Boston family man did not suit him one bit. His divorce from Stella was a bitter pill. She was left to raise her Laurel, who she called Lolly Baby. In young womanhood, Lolly Baby married Dick Grosvenor, a young banker on his way up, whose mother was a wealthy matron of Eastern society. Realizing that her spelling and reading, maybe even her writing, weren't up to snuff, Stella made the supreme sacrifice. In Mrs. Grosvenor's eyes, Stella could never be more than a bumbling hick from the sticks, and she could see the conflict a-building within Lolly Baby's soft bosom over the differences in their tastes and their worlds. And so rather than compromise 1 minute of Lolly's happiness, Stella choked back a sob and went out of Laurel's life. And now let's go back. Let's go back in time and listen to Stella Dallas.
We give you now Stella Dallas, a continuation on the air of the true-to-life story of mother love and sacrifice, in which Stella Dallas saw her beloved daughter Laurel marry into wealth and society, and realizing the difference in their tastes and worlds went out of Laurel's life. These episodes in the later life of Stella Dallas are based on the famous novel of that name by Olive Higgins Prouty and are written by Anne Hummer. And now, Stella Dallas. Tonight, Stella's neighbor, Paul Wyman, did a dramatic and fearful thing. He boarded off the south wing of his home and is keeping his 18-year-old daughter Celia there, a prisoner. And when Stella left the Wyman home to walk around the block to the rooming house, she was desperately afraid. Well, an hour has passed. It is a soft spring night in Boston, but Stella feels a chill in her living room. She's standing at the window, thinking of Celia, when...
Oh, come in.
Miss Dallas?
It's Paul Wyman.
Yes, I know you're surprised to see me.
Of course I am.
I thought you would be. But I had to talk to you. I've done what was best for Celia. And I'm going to force you to admit it.
Mr. Wyman, there's just one question I want to ask you, and that's how much your housekeeper, Reba Collins, had to do with you deciding to keep your daughter a prisoner.
Now, dear Mrs. Dallas, for you to take that tone with me...
You came here. You've been seeking me out time and time again, and I've said as little as I could. I've told you I don't know how many times I don't want to interfere. But, Mr. Wyman, I think you really love Celia. I don't believe you want to be so cruel.
Of course not.
Well, you think now it's the only honest thing to do.
You've no cause to be angry with me.
I'm not angry. I'm just heartsick for Celia. Was it Mrs. Collins who suggested that you have the south wing boarded up?
Mrs. Dallas, Reba and I talked over what's best for Celia. And only a few days ago, Reba hoped that Celia could go out to parties, meet young people here in Boston.
And just why did she change her mind?
Because she knows it's best that Celia stay at home.
Oh,
We've got to keep her from meeting that young architect, Stephen Kelby, anywhere at any home.
oh, I see. Yes, I know that's how you feel. Oh, here, Mr. Wyman, sit down, won't you, in this chair?
Thank you. I hope you aren't too angry with me to let me stay for a few minutes.
I told you I'm not angry.
Please don't be. Mrs. Dallas, I don't understand the strange power you have over me. I need to talk to you. It may sound fantastic, but I feel as if you're the only person who can help me.
Oh, I'd give so much to be able to help. You know, your daughter makes me think of Lolly when she was 18 years
You
old.
shouldn't compare the girls. Your daughter's been able to have a happy marriage.
Why can't Celia have a happy marriage, too? Why are you so set against her marrying?
I'm afraid for her life.
Afraid for her life if she marries? Oh, now look, Mr. Wyman. I don't have to keep saying I don't want to interfere because you know I'm only trying to help. But you've got to tell me some facts. Is there some terrible secret in your family that should keep Celia from marrying?
Mrs. Dallas.
You want to tell me. You wouldn't come to see me so often if something wasn't just urging you to tell me. And I've never forgotten how you said you felt guilty because you destroyed somebody's life.
Yes. Yes, that is true.
Oh, Mr. Wyman, you seem to want to tell me about that. You said it wasn't...
Murder? No, it wasn't that. It wasn't murder in the eyes of man.
But you think it was in the eyes of God. That's why you feel so guilty. You live in the fear that God is blaming you for some unspeakable crime. And so you take your fear out on your daughter, Celia.
No, I do not do that. I'm protecting Celia.
What are you protecting her from? Mr. Wyman, she has the same right to love and happiness that every other girl has.
Mrs. Dallas, you don't understand. If I could tell you the whole story, you would.
Then please tell me the whole story.
I can't do that.
Why can't you?
I can't, that's all. Well, it has been very good to see you, but I shan't stay any longer.
Oh, gee, please do. I'd like for you to.
No, perhaps I shouldn't have come.
Oh, don't say that, Mr. Wyman. I want you to come over here whenever you feel like it, and I hope you will.
Thank you, Mrs. Dallas. Good night.
Good night, Mr. Wyman. He's gone. Oh, dear heaven, so many folks in this world are desperately unhappy. I was angry with Mr. Wyman before he came. Yes. But every time I talk to him, I get the feeling he's as much to be pitied as Celia is. I wonder, what's the matter with his life? He seems so self-tortured. And I know he's in a dangerous state of mind.
Mr. Wyman.
Oh. Why, it's Laurel Grosvenor. Well, did you just drive up?
Yes, I've come to see Mummy. Weren't you coming out of the rooming house?
Yes, I was. I've been talking with your mother.
Oh, have you? Well, I'm surprised to see you. You had such a bad fall this afternoon in your home.
Oh, it wasn't so very serious.
But you should take care of yourself.
Laurel, I want your mother to take care of herself.
What?
I want her to put her own peace of mind first. Now, you're sensible and you care a great deal for your mother. So if she says anything to you about my daughter Celia, well, reassure her.
I know what you mean, Mr. Wyman. I must get on inside because I promised Mrs. Grosvenor I wouldn't be away from home long.
Then I mustn't detain you.
It's been nice seeing you. Good night, Mr. Wyman.
Good night, Laura.
Mommy, darling?
Lolly, is that you?
It certainly is. And I hope you're alone. Oh, are you? Is Mrs. Grady in your apartment?
Oh, no, I'm all by myself, and I'm glad I am, too, honey.
I only have about 2 seconds. And, Mommy, I know Mr. Wyman was here. I saw him outside.
Yes, honey.
That's why I had to see you again today, because of the Wymans. You know Mrs. Collins and Paul Wyman are going to have dinner at Mrs. Grosvenor's one night soon.
You bet I know.
Well, Reba Collins phoned me about an hour and a half ago and asked me to have lunch with her at the Wyman home tomorrow.
Oh, Lolly.
It'll be very simple, just us two. I think she's afraid she wasn't quite nice enough to me today after the accident.
I'll never forget how she wanted to get the police to arrest Steve Kelby.
Mummy, she still thinks that he pushed Mr. Wyman down the basement stairs.
Oh, Lolly, baby, she don't really think that.
Well, I'll try to find the answers to all the mysteries tomorrow at lunch.
Oh, I wish you weren't going to see her.
But I want to.
Lolly, I got a funny feeling about it.
But Mrs. Grosvenor likes Mrs. Collins. And it's more sensible for me to straighten things out in the Wyman home than for you, Mommy.
Oh, no, Lolly. Now listen to me, please. You mustn't get mixed up in the trouble in that house.
I'm sorry. I know I'm interrupting.
Oh, I see.
Yes, it is, Stella. I didn't know Laura was here.
Hello, Stephen. Do come in because I have to leave.
But, Lolly, about going to the Wymans tomorrow.
I may see you before lunch. Please don't be upset about it. Stephen, I hate to rush away.
I understand, Laura.
Bye, Mommy, darling.
Goodbye, Lolly. Do drop by if you have time. Well, Steve, I would have telephoned you if you hadn't come here.
Thank you.
I've been wanting to tell you that Paul Wyman doesn't hold you responsible for his fall down those stairs.
What have they done to Celia?
They haven't done anything to her. Now, Steve, as hard as it is, you've got to have patience.
Stella, she's not in her old room at the house. That room is empty.
You found out.
Now, don't ask me how I found out. I know those two fiends have done something to her. I think Wyman has locked her in that secret room where he spends most of his crazy days.
No, he hasn't. I know what happened. And I'll tell you if you'll just keep calm, Steve.
I'm perfectly calm.
Steve, you're in love with Celia and...
Stella, tell me what happened.
Okay. There's a very nice apartment, a very comfortable apartment in the south wing of the Wyman house. And Celia has moved there.
On their orders. Well, isn't that so?
They've boarded off the south wing.
I knew it. She's a
Now,
prisoner.
please, Steve, take it easy. No matter how peculiar all this seems, Mr. Wyman loves Celia, and he's trying to do something he thinks is right.
Stella, my dear Stella, it just happens that Wyman and that Collins woman will talk to you. They'll yell and shout if they see me again, but they will talk to you. So, will you get your hat and coat and go over to the Wyman house with me?
No, I don't think I ought to do that.
You've got to.
Oh, I don't think it's good sense.
I've got to talk to Celia tonight.
But you can't do that.
Well, I can report that crazy man to the police, and I will.
Look now, Steve. That's like Mrs. Collins, the way she talks.
Stella, something terrible is the matter with Wyman. Do you want him to drive Celia out of her mind?
Believe me, this excitement, this anger and emotion keeps you from thinking clear.
That maniac isn't going to get away with boarding Celia up in the south wing of the house.
It's not so frightening as it sounds,
But
really.
you know that it is. You know that. The real truth is you're so terrified of what that madman will do that you're paralyzed and don't dare do anything.
No, sorry, Steve. You're wrong about that, but we can't do anything tonight.
Well, if you won't go to the Wymans, I'll go
Oh,
along.
you mustn't do that. There'll be trouble if you do.
There certainly will be, because, Stella, I'm going to get help. I'm going to get Celia out of that house. If you won't go, I'll...
All right, Steve. I'll go over to the Wymans and make sure she's safe.
Thank you.
If you promise to stay away, Celia will be safer if you don't try to see her. Will you agree to that, Steve? Will you agree to stay away?
Stella is in the center of these fiercely conflicting emotions. Celia, Paul, and Stephen each has asked her help. You'll want to hear the stirring and unusual drama tomorrow on Stella Dallas. This chapter in the later life of Stella Dallas is written by Anne Hummert and is based on the famous character created by Olive Higgins Prouty in her great novel. Stella Dallas will be on the air at the same time tomorrow. This is Frank Gallup speaking.
As I mentioned earlier, Stella Dallas began on radio in 1938 and continued until 1955. I was looking over some of the old radio soap operas. Most of them were on the radio for 20 years or more. Just Plain Bill, on the air starting in 1933, went off in 1955. The Romance of Helen Trent, 1933 to 1960. Ma Perkins, 1933 to 1960. Backstage Wife, 1935 to 1959. The Goldbergs, 1936 to 1945. And on we go. In our second half hour, we'll be featuring The Lone Ranger. Let's take a look at some of the background on The Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger was first heard January 30th, 1933 on Detroit station WXYZ. The show was truly a product of Depression America. And soon after the stock market crashed, George W. Trendle and John H. King decided to go into radio. Trendle was a lawyer turned theater executive, and King was a theater palace pioneer who was said to have built one of the first movie houses in the nation. In partnership, they bought Detroit station WXYZ, then a CBS outlet. Trendle made some immediate changes. He looked for more creative programming at the local level and began to put together a company for acting talent on WXYZ Productions. Well, CBS wouldn't permit any tampering with its primetime schedule, and so Trendle severed his connections with the network and prepared to go it alone. Independence was particularly precarious in those days, and Trendle's decision to cast off his affiliation was a gusty one. The station was soon dropping hundreds of dollars a week, but Trendle had an idea. He would develop a new show, a western of unprecedented wholesomeness, with a bigger-than-life hero distinguishable from all others. He set down some basics and submitted them to his staff for reaction. And he took their suggestions under advisement and emerged with a rough outline of his hero. The outline led ultimately to this general background. And let's listen now. In Bryant's Gap, the canyon narrows and the cliffs rise high on either side, and the wind whistles through the rocks that have cracked away and fallen. And just inside the gap is a small grassy hill in the bleak surroundings of rock and wind-blown sand. And beyond the hill at the base of the cliff, a deep cave cuts into the rock. Nearer, just coming into view now, 5 crude wooden crosses mark the top of the hill. They have been here a long time. Many years ago, 6 Texas Rangers chased the ruthless Butch Cavendish gang through the Badlands for a final showdown at Bryant's Gap. The party was headed by Captain Dan Reed, and among those in his command was his younger brother John. The Reed brothers had been partners in a rich silver mine strike before duty called. And they planned to return to the mine when their service with the Rangers was through. But they rode into an ambush. The Cavendish gang fired down upon them with high-powered rifles from both rims of the canyon. Trapped on the smooth floor, Captain Reed asked one final promise of his younger brother. "My wife and son Danny are coming out here soon. If you get through this, work our silver mine and see that they get my share." Well, John Reed knew that the odds were against him. His brother fell, and then John too was hit. And from the rim, the Cavendish gang watched the massacre for a long time. Nobody moved. Satisfied, Butch Cavendish rode away with his men. The floor of Bryant's Gap was still again. And that night, an Indian examined the bodies by moonlight. One man lived. The Indian carried young John Reed to the cave, where he bathed and dressed the wounds. And then he buried the 5 Texas Rangers And realizing that the outlaws might return, he made a sixth grave and left it empty. Only when the fiendish Butch Cavendish was brought to justice could the sixth mound be dismantled and the earth smoothed over. For 4 days, the Indian cared for the lone surviving ranger. At last, John Reed's eyes fluttered open. At once, Reed recognized the Indian as a childhood friend whose life he had once saved. "Your name is Tonto," he said. "You remember," the Indian replied with satisfaction. "Years ago, you called me Kimosabe," Reed said. "That's right, and you still Kimosabe. I mean faithful friend." Well, Reed asked about the fate of his companions. "You only ranger left," Tonto said. "You lone ranger." And so, in the cave below Bryant's Gap, John Reed became the Lone Ranger, where he donned the mask that would become his trademark. He buried his old identity along with his 5 comrades, and he and Tonto made a pact. As long as you live, as long as I live, I will ride with you. We'll get back to more history on the Lone Ranger, but now it's time for our radio band remote.
Yes, in person, Louis Armstrong.
Hello, everybody, and thank the Army. This is Louis Armstrong, all set to make a little speech to you men at the Geiger Field. And the long and the short of it is that we're going to do very little talking, a big heap of playing from this great big hangar for you aviation engineers. So, men, here's hoping you like it. Way in the eastern Maine, the reason why we went up there, we thought we could catch some game. As we were hunting, way in the middle of the night, we shot at something that looked like a grizzly bear, and the doggone thing turned white. I said to my brother, "Come on and let's go home." He said, "Now, if you're going to the house, you have to go alone." As we were hunting, bristled up high, I looked toward my house, and I didn't even say goodbye. I dropped that gun, the way I run. Brother Bill said, "Boy, it's the matter with you? And I don't like me would run some too. I run so fast to say, they couldn't catch me all day. The way I run across the field. Oh, you couldn't catch me with automobile." Brother Bill got so excited, he commenced to shooting at me. I heard those bullets zizzling all among those trees. I was running so fast that night, my feet was dragging the ground. I heard a little jailbird in the tree singing Alabama bound. I passed right by my house. I didn't have time to knock. I passed right by a good crack game. I didn't have time to stop. I passed right by a gin mill, stopping to get a little gin. And I didn't have a dime to pay for it, and I had to cut out again. I'm going home. I'm all alone. Brother Bill said, "Boy, what's the matter with you? And I don't like me to run some too. I run so fast to say, the fella couldn't catch me all day. Yeah, I run across the field." Ripping down the Union Jack. Oh, you couldn't catch me. Oh, you couldn't catch me. No, you couldn't catch me without money.
Well, there you had our radio band remote for this week. That was Louis Armstrong and the orchestra, a broadcast heard sometime during the Second World War. Well, let's get back now to our story about the Lone Ranger. We learned just before our radio band remote that Mr. Trendo had decided to create a new character for his radio station, and it turned out to be the Lone Ranger. You heard what he and his staff came up with for a character, but to transfer the character from idea to script, Trendo hired Franz Stryker, a young, hungry writer from Buffalo who had worked with the station on another project. Stryker had talked with his pioneering uncle who had once worked in a Denver saloon, and he had some ideas of his own. It was Stryker who fleshed out Tonto, who filled the Rangers' guns with silver, and who added the cry, "Hi-ho, silver!" The silver mine became the Rangers' chief source of income, and the source of the silver bullets that filled his six-gun. He found a wild white stallion, named him Silver, and made silver shoes for the horses' feet. He hired an honest old man of modest needs to work the mine, and then he set out to find his lost nephew, Dan Reed, and to bring the men of the Cavendish gang to justice. Well, such was the fictional heritage of the Lone Ranger, one of the most famous champions of all radio. Through the month of December 1932, Stryker and Trendle worked on the character, refining the image until, to Trendle, it was just about perfect. Trendle vetoed Stryker's suggestion that the Ranger be humanized with a sense of humor. Nor did Trendle agree with others in his staff that the Lone Ranger should talk in Western slang. Trendle wanted a mass man, with grim dedication to his single purpose, a man who never clipped his G's or failed to use good grammar. The Lone Ranger had a code, and he never broke it, and it was Trendle's belief that the kids would buy it. And they did. When the show was less than 4 months old, it drew more than 24,000 replies to its first premium offer. About 70,000 children turned out to see the masked man in person at a school function, creating pandemonium for traffic police and causing the producers to keep the Lone Ranger under wraps thereafter. The show's fame and range grew rapidly. Well, old-time radio friends, I guess our first half hour's just about up. So let's pause now for station ID, and then we'll be back with that Lone Ranger broadcast.